Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of Darf Talks. I am your host, Darf Mike, and this week I'm going to be joined by Colin Chan, the one of the co-owners of Vireo Pro. So, how are you doing, Colin?
I'm doing great. I just got outside today for the first time in my life. Stretched my legs a little bit, got a coffee. I'm awake. I'm ready.
All right. Well, let's get right into it then. So first of all, just you're very new to the scene, very new in terms of an org, an environment. Let's just go through an introduction of you as a person. What's your background first in Counter-Strike, I guess?
Okay, so actually, even though our org didn't really start in Counter-Strike, me as a person, I started in Counter-Strike. I used to just play a lot of different games casually with my friends. And really what sort of happened was I had some friends that were getting into FPS games, and I was sort of interested in it too. And one day I had a bunch of friends playing Counter-Strike together, and I didn't really like it actually at first. I just saw videos of it, and I didn't like it. And then they actually bought me a copy of CS, and I kind of got hooked on it. And I spent a lot of time actually just, typical story, just playing matchmaking with my friends and all of that. And then what happened was I kind of got introduced to esports and the competitive scene, and I kind of got into that. And at the time, I was bad. I was really bad, of course. And I actually tried to play competitively. Not even
Mm,
open, by the way, like not even open. Like there were these like little indie tournament league things that would go on for like these silver threes or whatever. I would play those. And there were
mm,
actually like these little quote unquote orgs that would pick it. It was weird. And they had these like $10 per team entry fees. It was interesting. That's actually really funny. I think there might be like one or two players playing MDL right now that might have played those a while ago and then just got a lot better over time.
mm,
Um, but yeah, after that, I actually started playing actual CS. Well, as close as you can get to it anyway. I played Open a little bit, and then I played IM, and I did really badly. And I kind of realized at that point I didn't think really competitive CS was for me because I didn't think that the pressures that you kind of have as a player. I kind of thought it through, like, if I ever somehow was good enough to go pro, I kind of figured I probably wouldn't be able to live up to the kind of goal I would have. I think that as a player, you want to have the mentality to go straight to the top and stay there and win all the
mm.
time. And I don't think I'd really have the talent necessary to ever get to that point. So I kind of just let that go. I figured, there are a million other people better suited to this sort of thing than me. But I was really interested in esports as a whole. I wanted to stay in esports somehow. And, we're working through all of these lower divisions. There are a lot of quote unquote orgs, right? These little like bedroom orgs that make like a
Mm.
Twitter account. They have their little affiliate sponsors with the discount codes and all that. And they were paying league fees. And I kind of noticed that it was pretty funny. All of these orgs, they were totally like illiterate. Their English was awful. And the way they tweeted, it was sort of like a 10-year-old just kind of mashing his head on the keyboard, right? And I was like, I thought, I could do this 1,000 times better. And I had some pretty decent knowledge of graphics design. So I was like, okay, I'll make some graphics and I'll make a Twitter account and I'll start tweeting. And that's basically what I did. And I made a little Facebook page and I would write articles on there. And what ended up happening was I figured, you know what, I have some extra money on the side. How about I get an open team, just for fun? I'll get an
Mm.
open team in CS. And this was actually a different esport org that I'd started. It was called Habit Gaming, but nobody would have heard of that. That was how I got started in Rivals of Aether. Really, I was running this org by myself. And what basically happened was, so I picked up this open team, and I would just tweet out their match results and tweet out the stats sometimes. And this Rivals of Aether player actually approached me. And Rivals of Aether is still a pretty small game now, but at the time it was even smaller, like crazy small. So
Mm.
this player approached me. His name was Toko, and he still plays under my org now. He's a great guy. He works really hard, and he's also a TO. He's actually going to be now. He's a tournament organizer. He's hosting the next Rivals of Aether Major, which is actually really big for him. But he approached me and he sent me a message, and I was actually interested. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of get into a scene that at the time it was cheap. And I thought, you know what, I could grow with this. I could actually start something here because, I felt like I was already doing things better than a lot of other people at the time, which it kind of is. A lot of these MDL, even orgs in the MDL, they kind of just they have some money and they kind of throw it around, but they don't really know what they're doing, I guess is what I would
Mm.
say.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not going to get too much into that. I don't want to name names or anything, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people watching can already think of a couple. So I was like, yeah, I could grow something here. And I started sponsoring this player and getting him out to events. I saved up money to help him to fly out. And what I sort of realized after a while was then that I was actually not too bad at kind of managing all of this and helping people to book flights and all of this. And then um, a sponsor actually approached me, which is still sponsoring us today, a sponsor called Kuwait. They're local to my city, so most people wouldn't have heard of them. Basically, it's sort of like discount, kind of like discount programs for restaurants, and it's sort of like rewards programs. But I'm not really here to give a sales pitch. So basically,
Hey,
this first
gotta plug your
sponsor,
sponsors, man.
this first sponsor, they actually approached me and they offered to pay me monthly, and I was kind of starting to realize this is viable. This is something I could actually do. I could actually make this work. So I ran Habit for a little while. I managed to get a couple of followers with that open team playing on streams with those little like indie leagues. And after a while, I ended up kind of dropping them because I realized, this isn't really worth the time. It's not really helping me that much. But the Rivals of Aether player kind of grew in popularity, and he grew in relevance in that scene. And we kind of got a small following from that. And the sponsor was happy about that because we were starting getting clicks, starting getting analytics and all that, good analytics on the Twitter page and all that, getting views, getting engagements. So this was kind of when I realized that I could make this work. And I kind of just ran with it. So there's this COD sniping clan called X13, which I don't want to talk about them too much because it kind of goes into a really, really, basically the epitome of everything that's bad about MBL orgs today. But I'm not going to talk about that too much. So they've actually kind of offered to absorb my org into theirs because they had pretty decent following, like 13K or something. I'm actually not sure at this point like how many of that was active, but so I ended up going into that, and I knew someone from there who's in that ownership group. His name was Carter, and he wasn't really happy with the way that X13 was running. They weren't really, they didn't really keep track of the money they spent. They weren't really clear on a lot of things. They were making some really, really horrible offers to a lot of players. They actually tried to take money from a player once, which is crazy. He was a Brawlhalla player. They were going to fly him out to a LAN, and if he didn't win back enough prize money to reimburse the money X13 spent on him, he would have to pay them back. And I was like, okay, what are you doing?
That's pretty shady.
Yeah, it is. And I was realizing, a lot of these people don't actually know as much about really just the business aspect of this in general as they seem to, even if they have a big following. And so Carter wasn't really happy with what was going on, and I wasn't really happy with what was going on, so we both left. And that was when we decided we'd start Vireo. And by this point, I'd realized that this was actually something that I could make work. So I got an apparel company. I got and then I kept the sponsor that we have right now. And I got another. They're paying us a little bit of money every month, which helps out. And I saved basically. A lot of these MDL orgs, right? They don't really realize with what they tend to do is they make promises and they think that the money's just going to come in after they make the promises, and then they just think, we'll promise to pay you guys, and then we'll get the money from sponsors or investors or whatever later, and then we'll pay you on the deadline. It's like, no, when you're running a business and you plan to make these promises, you have to. You don't have to pay the players up front, right? That would be silly because they have to, carry out the service before you pay them, and then you pay them for that service. But you have to you have to have the money up front, even if you're not paying it up front, before you make the promise. And that's what a lot of org owners, they don't really seem to understand, which surprised me a lot. I thought, it would be kind of just a common sense thing. But yeah, I saved money, and we managed to buy out the contract of 2 more Rivals of Aether players. One is number 13th in the world, and one is number 2. Rivals, obviously, it's a smaller community, so it's not really, because it's not a big game. It's a lot cheaper to maintain these players. Actually getting paid a pretty negligible salary, if I'm going to be honest, but it's a lot better than what a lot of Rivals of Aether players are making. But yeah, we gained a little bit more of a following from that, and I figured, I want to get into CS because this is where I started. This is what I'm interested in, and I think out of the big games in esports right now, it's the cheapest. Like you look at League of Legends, like in the LCS and the franchising and the buy-ins and all that. You don't want to get into that, but Counter-Strike, it's nice, simple. You can just come in. It's all like individually organized outside of Valve's influence. You got the Pro League, you got the MDL, and it's a lot cheaper. Like I think bottom tier Pro League teams, they'll be making somewhere around like 5K a month. And in the LCS, I think any team in the LCS would easily be making like a 6-figure salary, man. Like it's so, it's a lot. It's a lot easier to kind of grow your brand by getting into a game like CS. And I was familiar with it. I know how the scene works because I tried to get into it as a player for a while. So it wasn't really hard for me to kind of integrate our org into that system. So because I still played a lot, I knew some people. I'd gotten to know Zelsis a little bit because I subbed to his stream, and then he added me on Steam, and I would talk to him sometimes. So I was like, okay, yeah. And I asked Zelsis if he could help me to find a team that would work with the budget we had, which wasn't as big as I probably would want it to be. But it's because honestly, the truth is just that MDL teams don't really attract sponsors as much as a Pro League team would, because the viewership's a lot smaller. And if you go to someone on the other side of the world, they could a lot more easily tell you who Cloud9 is than, I guess, like Blackout or Swole Patrol. So it's a problem that the MDL has in NA right now, is that a lot of orgs don't want to get into it. But the problem is that the ROI is just it's kind of just it's bad. But I wanted to be in CS.
It's a bit of a gamble when you pick up an MDL team. You expect them to gain value from the point that you signed them at, right?
Yeah, it really. Yeah, I mean, especially on a season like this, when there's a non-promotion season, a lot of the gamble that you get out of getting an MDL team would be that they make Pro League. Because if they make Pro League, then that now they're getting the clicks and now they're getting the views. But before that, a lot of people just don't know who they are. A lot of people just don't care. But I wanted to be in CS. I was ready to lose money on it. So I wanted to get a team, but I couldn't spend too much. And that's why I had to go to Zelsis and say, I need to work with a small budget here, but I want to make this work. So he helped me to message a couple people, find a list of teams that would work with what I was offering, which was, just fully pay for travel, pay for hotels, and a salary of actually, you know what? Yeah, I'll say it, $500 per month. I don't think it matters. I mean,
is that per player?
Yeah, that is per player, of course. I'm not going to pay.
Look, man, I don't know.
Yeah,
you gotta get perspective.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd hope that nobody's playing for $100 per month. That's like horrible. I honestly, in my opinion, $500 per month is already horrible enough per person. But it's about the ROA. It's a business in the end. I can't really do anything about that per se. So yeah, I had a list of a couple of different teams. I think I'll just go ahead and not say who they are. I'm just gonna leave that out of it. But yeah, I did have a couple of different teams that I did talk to first, and they ended up not working out. A couple were because of motivation issues, and some were just because, I don't know, they just never got back to me. I started trying to talk, and after a while, it just kind of fell out. So actually, I kind of took a period where I just decided, you know what, maybe we won't get into CS right now. But then what happened was actually then Born they dropped their team because they tried to sell their contracts. I'm sure you already heard the story from MOTM, but they tried to sell their contracts because they couldn't pay them anymore, and then the org that they sold their contracts to couldn't pay them either.
They never paid them.
Yeah, he never paid them. Never even paid them the first month. So because he couldn't pay them, he tried to sell their contracts without telling them. And the org he sold the contracts to, that I'm not going to name because, that's pretty embarrassing. The org that he sold the contracts to actually couldn't pay them either. So the contract was void and they were just without an org. And then I was like, okay. And I asked Elsis to go ahead and message him for me. I was like, how much do you think the Born guys are getting paid? And he messaged me, and then he messaged MOTM, and MOTM, he thought, okay, well, if Zelsis is saying that these guys aren't shady, then I'll bring it up with the rest of the team. And then they did, and then they added me, and we talked for a while. And, the kind of process that comes with picking up an MDL team, it's really not that intimidating, especially compared to, I think picking up a pro team would be a little bit different. But even then, it's not hard to work with because they're just people in the end. So just a couple messages back and forth, just worked out what we were offering, and after that, it was just simple. Just I had a template contract ready for them. I had it ready to send to all of them. They looked it over and they were happy with it. And then they signed, and the rest is history.
Okay. So that was a lot to unpack. You covered a lot of the bases I was trying to hit, but I kind of want to bring us back a little bit and start to get into and dive into a little more detail about some of the things you just covered. First, just sticking to talking about you for a little bit. One of the things you talked about and you touched on in a couple of your different points is the lack of experience and the lack of sort of a business acumen or background in a lot of the orgs that you've seen or the teams that you've seen or the various entities in the esports scene that you've come across in your time. What is it about you and your partner and your organization? What is it in your background that gives you maybe a little bit more experience or knowledge of these things?
Really, to me, a lot of it kind of came as kind of second nature, common sense. I come from a family of business people, people who've done a lot of investing, and run a couple of decently successful businesses. My parents, they never worked for other people. They always worked very independently. So I kind of just picked up things on instinct from them. I'm getting a lot of text messages. These really need to stop.
Time to hit
But
that
yeah,
mute button.
I'll hit the mute button right now. But yeah, it's always just kind of run in the family, this kind of business sense, and this kind of common. I always figured it was more of a common sense to think, if you plan to spend money, you need to have the money. You got to have money to make money. It's classic capitalism. But I was actually surprised by the amount of people that didn't really understand that. But yeah, I feel like what really gives me the edge over anything is really just kind of a familial background. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with just how things work, and that's all I really see is that makes me any different from anyone else. Otherwise, I'd have the same education opportunities, just going to public schools and all that. It's not really anything. I don't feel like there's anything special about me other than just, I guess, instinct.
Okay. So no formal business education, really. Just sort of the familial, like being raised with it, being raised around businesses and investment and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm actually going to go ahead and keep that a secret for now because I think it's a very interesting mystery and I'd love to watch people try to figure it out. I've actually been told before that I look different in every picture of me.
Okay.
So that's actually an interest. I actually want to see people try to figure that out.
I guess I'll ask it a different way, or ask a different question that sort of covers the same sort of base. You said you were talking about education. You said like the same public school opportunities. So have you graduated high school at this point? We'll start at the basic.
It's a very interesting question, and I'm gonna answer it like a politician because I think this is even funnier. I'd actually love to see people actually wonder if an org owner hasn't graduated yet. So now I'm gonna go ahead and not answer. I'm gonna go ahead and say it would be funny if I hadn't, and I'm gonna leave it at that because now I just realized this is probably the best joke I could ever tell.
Okay. So do you have any college experience?
Do I?
I mean, I guess I can probably try and do some research, but all right, we'll leave it there. Undetermined education level. So, all right. So you've been raised in the family business. You've been raised around family businesses. No formal business training, but sort of a nose for it, if you will. Does your partner have sort of a similar point? Carter, is he a similar level of like experience and education, or is there maybe a little more expertise or a little less? What does he bring?
We have a third partner that I haven't mentioned yet is Myra. I feel like Myra kind of brings in the most sort of formal expertise here because I will confirm that yes, I have two partners that have definitely graduated, but I'd like to keep myself a mystery because I think it would be funny if people thought that I hadn't. But yes, Myra has plenty of has obviously been through college and everything, and brings in a lot of the expertise. Anything that I can't fill, Myra fills out pretty well. I was able to kind of wing my way through a lot of things like bookings and negotiations, and getting contracts drafted was pretty simple too. And I've saved up a lot of money just from working jobs. A lot of minimum wage and a lot of slaving away and a lot of basically just kind of holding up and not really spending anything. And that managed to get me a lot of money that I could kind of build up towards here. And it helps too that sponsors kind of paid in monthly to keep things running smoothly. But yeah, Myra does bring in a lot of the expertise with having a formal business education and really just having a lot of the terminology and really having I guess more of a solid foundation that you can actually look to and say this is a little bit more trustworthy, I guess. I've done a lot of the work up until now, a lot of the negotiating, and I have pretty decent connections within my family that kind of help out with keeping things running smoothly. I wouldn't try to have no formal business education and try to run things by myself like that. I'm not really that. My ego's not that big. I don't think I would be that irresponsible. So obviously, I keep things outside to kind of make sure that I'm going in the right direction. But I've done a lot of this myself.
Okay. So when you were first getting started, I mean, it almost seems like you fell into this a little bit. I mean, when you started out, you said you were a parody account of orgs.
Yeah, I was a parody account
of a team. So do you think that having that guideline of almost what not to do in terms of the things that you're parodying, do you think that helped inform your sort of image of how to proceed once you started to actually decide to make this something?
When I started out with that parody account, what I basically did was I looked at the big brands and I mimicked them, and that was all I did. I would just kind of make graphics that looked in a similar style to other orgs. I just took a lot of inspiration from the way they tweeted things and, how much they could banter, how much they could kind of engage with the community without kind of stepping over a line of professionalism. And I sort of just I copied that, I think, to a T, just being able to respond to certain things in a way that's kind of funny. And also the way to stay literate without really seeming kind of too, I guess, rigid is the best word I can use. Because, with an esport org, you kind of want to have a little bit of personality, but not too much. I'm not sure if that makes sense. So that was, I don't know. I feel like I haven't really with that parody account. I didn't really get any kind of I guess nothing came out of the parody account is basically what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
It was just sort of that starting point where it just kind of looked so real that it kind of just brought along actual people.
I guess I almost.
Yeah, I mean, I just did such a good job of making a joke that it ended up becoming way too real.
And so once you actually had a player and once you're sort of figuring this out, I mean, you spoke about your first sponsor, Koei. Koei, is that the right way to say that? Koei. Koei actually approaching you. Up until that point, did you really have like a game plan for how you're going through it, or was it like once you got contacted by a sponsor that you started to think, okay, this is a thing that I can do?
So what actually happened was, up until that point, I hadn't really planned things out that well. I'm not gonna lie. I had that first Rivals of Aether player, and I wanted to support him because he just genuinely seemed like a good, hardworking guy, and I wanted to be able to help him get to events. And I wasn't really sure how I was going to be building a brand or anything like that, or really making something that actually worked out. I kind of thought, this could fail eventually, but I figured it wasn't a big consequence because it was one player, and honestly, the social media presence, it was at the time, Rivals was small, so it was negligible, and I wasn't really too worried about it. My plan wasn't really, well, I didn't really have one at the time, but I kind of got that small following from Rivals, and when that first sponsor approached me, I was like, yeah, I can do this. So this guy actually, I was talking about it. I was talking about how I'd been running this parody account, and then I'd actually ended up sponsoring a player. And I'd been talking about it with a few different people. And one person ended up actually approaching me and saying, you know what? If this is actually getting clicks, if this is actually getting views, I will pay you to advertise this. And I was just thinking, if I could actually make this work. And it was from here where I really decided to actually start building a plan. So I was like, okay, well, how would I actually be able to effectively market this brand and get it to a point where I could turn it into a viable business? So first thing obviously is you got to get it registered, right? So, that costs $300. You get that filed away, and then I was like, okay, well now this isn't just a dumb Twitter thing anymore. Now it has a filing and everything, but just having a filing doesn't really make you a business per se, right? Because you still have to know what you're doing, and that's kind of the mistake a lot of people. I actually see that in a lot of orgs is they put LLC or in their bio. Like I don't know if they think that means something. I don't want to. I don't really want to be trying to ridicule people, but just being registered doesn't really. It does. I don't think it really says as much as people think it does. Anyways, so I kind of had this plan here where, maybe now I should start saving up and try to get the top players in Rivals Bay. They're like the top of the top, because then I can get the following that might actually manage to bring in enough views to get more sponsors, and then maybe I can actually start making money. And obviously, if we're talking realistically here, for most esports organizations, they never really make money for a really long time. I think all the top brands right now, a lot of them still haven't really been making a profit. A lot of them are still in the red because, with especially for example, let's say like Immortals, for example. I think they've been losing money for sure, like millions of dollars for the past couple of years, because they didn't really have many sponsors for like a huge period of time. I think like there's a 7-month period in 2017 or something where they had none or like two. But even like the orgs that have a lot of sponsors, they usually operate at a net loss, because it sponsors aren't really going to spend. They're going to spend a lot, but they're not going to spend that much, and it costs a lot to maintain all of these people and pay them that much. So right now, orgs, they just keep operating off of like constantly flowing investment capital, but they're not necessarily just making money. And it's the same with Vireo. Like there have been, because we're operating on a smaller scale, and the expenses are a lot smaller. So every once in a while we might find ourselves in the green for a month or two, but a lot of the time you're going to be losing money, and that's something that a lot of MDL orgs, they don't really realize. You're going to be losing money for a lot of time. I'm not going to point people out, because there are actually a lot of people that they have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. I think there are some decent examples of actually decent orgs in the MDL. I think Blackout is a good one. Vision's a good one. There are people that actually know what they're doing. But a lot of people aren't really prepared to lose money for a long period of time. And when you're getting into something that has to do with marketing, it's just a reality that you kind of have to get used to, is that you have to lose before you can win. But yeah, I kind of planned this out where I'm ready to lose money. I saved up, and I did the calculation, right? I had to know how much I was going to spend before I spent it, and then I spent it. It's, I guess it's not rocket science to me. I kind of figured, we'll get this many views, we'll build up a nice little sponsorship deck, and I'll just approach people and see what happens. And you can't really have, you should have a decent plan when you go into these things, but I think that in esports, it's not really very cut and dry, because, you can't really just expect people to fly at you, especially on a small scale like this. Sponsors don't really just run at you, because you're not really pulling in all those clicks, and you're not really, you're not really something that someone's heard of unless they go out of their way, especially at my level. I'm going to admit that. So, you can't really have a cut and dry plan and just expect everything to go really well. It's like you can make a plan, and then you can execute that plan, but you kind of have to expect that plan to go off the rails, and then you throw away the plan. So, I never went into too much detail with it, but I kind of had that outline where, try to approach as many people as possible, because nothing ventured, nothing gained, and see who's interested.
So I kind of have a question in this vein where, we're talking about like a lot of this is coming out of money that you've saved up, money that you're working towards. There's some being kicked in by sponsors, but there's an expectation of taking loss for a while for future growth and future gain and future attraction. I'm going to ask you a question, and you can feel free to either not answer this or answer this in very vague terms. At your current operating level, right, at the amount that you're paying out, the amount that you're taking in, how long can your org function before you'll either have to make changes or run out of cash?
Well, I've planned for at least until the end of 2018.
Okay.
I'll say that much. That's what I've planned for. I think that it could last longer, but that's what I've planned for sure. That's when all of the players that I have right now in every game will have a chance to resign, and that's going to be when I'm really going to have the time to kind of evaluate and self-reflect and see if this is really going to continue working out until then. But yeah,
Sure.
I've made sure that it at the very least it's going to last until people's contracts end, and to make sure everybody's happy, everybody's going to get paid.
Okay.
I can't really say too much more than that because there are a lot of random variables in this sort of thing, especially at this kind of level. So yeah, I can't really say anything more than that.
Sure. So here's another sort of question in a different vein, but in the same sort of approach. When you picked up this Counter Strike team, they've had a really good season in Mountain Dew League. I mean, they've been doing quite well. Honestly, I mean, you picked them up partway through the season, so there was already some indication that they were doing quite well. They were going to be something. But at the beginning of this season, to be quite frank, the estimation of this team was that it was probably a pretty middle of the road Mountain Dew League roster, and they've really stepped up in a big way. Was that something you expected getting into it, or is it something that has been a pleasant surprise for you?
Yeah, I did expect it. Actually, because I saw that this team before they've always been 9-7, 9-7, 9-7. They just kind of I feel like they just kind of needed that X factor to kind of really elevate the way they were playing, right? And you need 10 wins to make playoffs in MDL, so it's not like they were really that far away. It was just sort of
Sure.
that extra step they needed to take, and I think that MOTM was a good step in that direction, in a couple of ways, because I followed his stream a lot before that, and I think he has the right attitude towards the game, the right mind towards the game. He cares a lot when he loses, and he loves it when he wins. And I've heard him talked about the orgs he's worked with before. He likes orgs that communicate a lot. He talks. He's pretty open about his values. He just really cares about the game. He really wants to win. And he had really good stats this season too. It shows that he's really improving in a big way. And obviously, he was on that Broken Alliance roster that did really well in main. They managed to upset CLG in the E-League qualifier, I think it was. And then they won main, they made MDL, and then they benched MOTM there, but then that roster with MCE they made pro. So, MOTM's, kind of had that history of being on these teams that kind of beat expectations, I guess. So I'm not going to take away credit from the rest of the team because the rest of them have been playing really well too. I've seen ZNF step up in a lot of matches. And I think Paperboy's a pretty good leader also. I think he's pretty confident, which is obviously, I think, one of the most important things. Because, when you're playing CS, on this level especially, even when you're making the wrong decision, as long as you make the wrong decision confidently, it can work out, as long as you make the wrong decision confidently and together. So yeah, I did expect that. And obviously I got to come in the middle of the season too, because I got that chance to sign them when Bourne couldn't pay them anymore. So,
Sure.
I
they were already out to a light.
Yeah, they were already doing really well. So, I was ready for them to, kind of take it to the next level. Obviously, still on a bit of a bad qualifier streak, but I think that's something that you can just fix with time. If you can win BO1s in a league system, then you can do it in a qualifier. I think, it's more of just a mentality thing. So that's something they can really just fix with a little bit of time on their own.
So here's another question about the CS team and the future and planning for the future and potential future success. And this is very much about next season. Next season, obviously, is a move-up season. And the whole objective of MDL is to get to that point where you're ready to move up and you make it to Pro League and you make that huge jump in tiers and levels, in salary, in everything, in expectation. Presuming that this hypothetical scenario where next season they do qualify for playoffs and they do make it into the Pro League, either through relegation tournament or through outright winning, is your org ready to make that jump with them to Pro League, to a pro salary, to that kind of stability? Or would it be sort of a SOAR situation if you followed the SOAR Gaming situation where they played through MDL and then made Pro League and then sold the organization or the team to Dignitas because they realized they didn't have the resources to support a Pro League team in the way that a Pro League team needed to be supported? What's your thinking there, and have you sort of planned for it?
I have. I talked about this with the players, like I said. So I have them signed until presumably until after the MDL LAN for next season. So
Sure.
After that, if we feel like we can put our resources into supporting Pro League team, then they can re-sign with us. But I've made it clear to them that if either they feel like we can't or we feel like we can't, their contracts will be up. They can go ahead and find another org to sign with when they make pro if either party feels like they can't, we can't support them effectively.
Sure.
I'm pretty confident on the management side, right? But obviously there's the financial side too. Like, is is this going to be worth it? And I'm not going to make myself delusional, right? I'm not going to say that it's 100% thing. I plan for these things. So, if it's something that by that point we can still do realistically, then obviously 100% going to go for it. But I've made it so that the players have the freedom to leave if they want to by that point. Their contracts will be over. So,
Okay.
it all depends.
So specifically, the contracts are structured around MDL seasons and that kind of time length and logic, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had them signed until a specific date so that they'd at the very least play MDL and under us for sure.
Okay.
And we'd get the exposure from that, and that'll keep the sponsors happy. But my number one priority is to make sure that I don't lock them into anything, and I don't want to be kind of shady like all these other MDL orgs. I don't want to, kind of destroy these kinds of opportunities for them because, when you're playing in the MDL, it's not your job yet. It's once you get into the pro league, it's a job, but when you're in the MDL, it's not. You're not getting paid enough to live off of it. It's really more of just a thing you're doing on the side. It's like almost like it's a more than a hobby, but it's not a job yet. So I don't really want to treat them like employees, I guess. I don't want to restrict them very much, which is why I've made it so that they can sign with another org when they do make pro, because I don't feel like they're really, obviously they'll attract some views, but I don't feel like they're working for me yet. I don't think that I don't think I should treat them like they're working a full-time job, because they're not yet. I'm not paying them enough for it to be a full-time job. And their life doesn't revolve around Counter-Strike. They probably have other things to do. They're going to have families, they're going to have friends. MOTM's only 18. So obviously, he's not going to if he wanted to, he could just walk away and not dedicate his life to CS. So I'm not going to sign them and lock them in a contract forever. I want to make sure that even though CS is a big thing for them, I want to make sure that it's not going to take over their lives, because it's not their job yet.
Sure. Okay. So, all right. So assuming that we're going to play out a different hypothetical situation. Let's say they make Pro League, and let's say that you guys decide to part ways for whatever reason. Either you don't feel that you're ready to back them, they don't feel that you're ready to back them, they want to go a different way, different look, something along those lines. At that point, do you see your organization, Vireo Pro, remaining involved in the scene beyond this team? Picking up another team, finding themselves a place in the CS ecosystem specifically, or was it very much about this team?
I mean, yeah, for sure. If we don't have the capability to back that team if they made Pro League, then I would totally want to get back into the MDL. Because even if we can't back a Pro League team, I would hope at the very least that the amount of kind of advertisement that we can bring to sponsors would be attractive enough that we could keep ourselves running enough to remain in CS, and hopefully just maybe nurture another MDL team, just give them the support that they might need. Right now, the kind of support that we're offering to the team right now, we just help them with whatever they need, because I have a lot of cash that I've saved up to dish out. When Paperboy's mouse skates started peeling, we went ahead and replaced them for him. He actually, great guy, by the way, he actually asked us to deduct it from his salary, and I said, no, you're going to get paid in full, and I'm going to replace your mouse skates. So, I just want to be able to, kind of put all of these resources that I've kind of saved up into actually supporting people to the best I can. So, if this team were to make Pro League, we would definitely go right back in and get another MDL team for sure. But it would take a bit of time to maybe do some research and try to find a team that might be another outlier. But yeah, I would definitely try to get back into CS.
Okay. And now, so at this point, you've got two games that you're heavily involved in. You've got an MDL roster in CS. You're very new to the scene, but you're still, pretty involved in it with a top of MDL roster. You've got the Rivals of Aether. So what's the plan beyond that for expansion for the org? Are there other teams that you're looking to acquire? Are you looking to sort of sit on these right now and see how they grow? Are you maybe exploring other options? Like what's the direction, if you will, for growth for the org?
Well, I've been approached by a couple of different teams in other games. A Rainbow Six Challenger team did approach, and also a couple of people have been looking into trying to play Fortnite. But I when it comes to Fortnite, it's not really, it's kind of just a hype beast, I guess, sort of, and I don't really want to I don't really want to get into that unless it's at the top, which is a little bit more expensive than I think we can afford right now. As for other expansions, I think there's still a couple of things that we kind of need to consider. But I think that I'm kind of leaning personally. I'm not speaking for my co-owners, but my personal opinion is that I think I would rather kind of sit on what we have right now.
Okay.
It's not to say that we're not open to a little bit more expansion, but for now, I kind of want to sit on what we have because, beyond that, costs could get too high, and
Sure.
I'm not comfortable taking that risk. I don't want to wind up with anybody getting paid late or not getting paid at all, and I want to make sure that there's always something extra, and I don't want to dig into what is saved up kind of in that reserve of money, I guess, because things don't work out the way you plan them. They never do. That's just life. So
Sure.
I want to make sure that everything is safe, completely safe. And the risk of expansion outside right now just might be too big.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, too much growth can lead to collapse. You can create that sort of bubble atmosphere. So it sounds like a sensible plan. We talked about this a little bit before the interview, actually, but when you guys were first getting involved, a relatively unheard of organization, entirely unheard of, really, and at this level of CS, one of the comparisons that you heard where people were a little concerned that was like another iceberg. And obviously, there's a storied history of orgs at this level sort of collapsing, falling apart. Iceberg era, Born, as you're well aware, Denial, even, who had this, a lot longer of a history in the scene, and just tons of orgs like that sort of fly by night, come and go, leave, come back, that kind of thing. We've touched on it a lot just in terms of like preparation, planning, and that kind of stuff. But what if you had to distill it into like one sentence or sentiment or phrase, what differentiates you from those orgs that have come before?
I think what differentiates us mainly is just sort of the management side. I feel like we're a little bit more in control of the decisions we make. I think that what really went wrong for Iceberg was that they were too eager to kind of get into esports. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna be the next big thing. We're gonna bring Canada to the top. Oh yeah, we've got sponsors lined up. We're talking to them. We got investors. And I think the big problem for them was that they were talking to him, but they didn't have them. They didn't secure these things, but they just thought, because they started a talk, that means this money's already secure. And they were too eager to get into things. So they started making promises they couldn't keep because they assumed that they probably would be able to in the future. And then they went ahead and they got that Pro Dota team. And then they pick up an MDL team and they offer them a lot more money than I think that team might have normally even asked for in the first place. So, it really, I think the big thing for us is that we're a little bit more in control of the decisions that we make. We're not too eager to expand. We're not too eager to just run headfirst into the scene. We know what our limits are. And I think that's the big difference between us and a lot of the other orgs that get into the MDL and fall apart.
Sure. Okay. That makes sense in a lot of ways. So one other thing that's interesting about getting into CS at this time, even beyond MDL, we've seen, especially in North America, a lot of, it sounds kind of weird, capital flight from the CS scene of orgs leaving. You've had Misfits leave. You had CLG, a mainstay of the scene for a long time, leave. You had Splice get out of the scene. You've had a lot of different organizations leaving at what many view as sort of a critical juncture in the esports ecosystem, in the esports growth period. What, obviously, at MDL, it's a little bit of a different tier. It's a little bit of a different standard, but was that a cause for concern for you? And why did you still make the decision to invest in the CS team?
That wasn't a concern for me at all because from my point of view, what it seems like is that what all of these orgs have in common is that they're in the LCS and they're getting big new investments, all of them, to continue in the LCS, which is only going to get more expensive. And obviously that is great marketing, and these investors probably would want to make sure that all of their money is going into this really, really big thing. And CS is a big thing in its own right, but it's obviously not going to be as profitable as probably staying in this franchise league where you get revenue share and a lot of viewership all the time from all over the world. It appeals to Asia a lot more than CS would, for example. So, I think, it wasn't really a big concern for me because obviously we're not going to be in the LCS anytime soon. We don't need to be focusing all of our capital in this one big area. So it's not like CS was dying or anything. That's not what made these orgs pull out. It's just that
Sure.
they had better things to do, and we don't. So that's no concern for us.
Okay. Another aspect I want to ask about, in terms of just the way you all have been branding Vireo Pro. This is Vireo.pro, right? This is the esports branch. Um, I was reading, poking around your website, doing a little bit of reading. It seems like the idea is to have Vireo be a bit of an umbrella brand for other things as well. Um, there's the website is registered under Powerhouse Media Group. Is there sort of a plan for expansion outside of esports?
Yeah. So Powerhouse Media Group is also going to be focusing on a couple of other things.
Mhm.
So this is going to be including photography, videography, a little bit of kind of just sticking my hand in every basket as much as possible.
Mhm.
I haven't planned too big right now because I think esports should be the big focus since it's what we're already in, and that's where a lot of the money was planned to go. But the reason for this kind of umbrella sort of brand is because you want to be able to open up your options. I think that it's really personally for me, it would be a good idea to kind of open things up because realistically, sometimes things fail, sometimes things go wrong, and you want to be able to move into other areas. If I say
Mhm.
wanted to take this company and bring it into what real estate, just for an example, sounds kind of silly, but just an example, right? I wouldn't go there with a green bird that no one's heard of and act like that's a very professional name or really something that kind of fits into that world. So the main motivation for that was really just to open up options for the future.
Mhm.
But plans for that aren't really a big priority right now.
Sure. Okay. Um, let's see. Any other topics you want to hit that we haven't hit yet? I feel like we've done a pretty good umbrella of the org and focused in on a few good points. But any of the talking points that you still want to cover?
I don't think anything too important.
Okay.
Just one thing. I think that we should have totally gotten an invite to Star Ladder. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say who shouldn't have, but our team definitely should have been there. And
There's a little bit of
also,
controversy there.
yeah, NAVP best VP is all I
Honestly,
really
you
want
guys
to say
might
there.
be. You guys might be at this point. All I'm saying is EUVP is getting relegated. They've
Yeah,
got
I saw.
a little bit
They're
more
not looking
history than you
great.
guys. They're getting
Yeah,
relegated. It's going to be Virtus Advanced.
yeah, going from winning all the T1 events or at least making playoffs in the T1 events, they won one major, and now they're yeah, it's a
Is that part of
yikes.
the branding plan? Is just to scoop those Polish fans as they come off and flight to another VP?
It's actually funny. I didn't really think about that at first because so what happened was at first we were just Vireo Esports and I wanted to turn Vireo into the umbrella brand. So we did Vireo.pro and then
Hmm.
Vireo was going to become something else. But then instead we went with, okay, more professional name, Powerhouse Media Group. But then we kept Vireo.pro because there was no reason to change it. And then,
Hmm.
I kind of realized afterwards how similar it was to Virtus Pro. And
Very
then,
close.
yeah, when we actually picked up the MDL team, started getting on HLTV, I noticed all the comments like NAVP, budget VP, and I thought that's pretty funny, and it's actually getting us clicks, so I'm gonna run with it because it's a business, man. I need to I need to get the
Sure.
views.
Gotta
That's
have the
what sponsors
pitch.
care about. You got to have those profile visits.
Absolutely. Gotta get it while you can. Gotta find the angle, right? It's all about finding the angle. I guess I'd like to say on behalf of North American Counter Strike and the Mountain Dew League, it's great to have you here. It's great to have you guys involved. It's always good to see new orgs, more orgs getting involved in the scene, supporting their players. From this talk, it's been great to hear how much of a focus supporting your players really is, and stability and planning for the commitments that you've actually made to players. That's something that's really good to hear. Just because, as we've touched on plenty, it's not always the case. And I'd like to thank you so much for sitting down with me, for taking the time to sit down and explain your point of view and give some insight on this new org to the scene. So thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
And I think that's gonna about wrap us up for tonight. Once again, I am Darf Mike. I've been here courtesy of Nerd Street Gamers. If you've enjoyed this content, you can give this channel a follow. On Mondays, we'll be doing the Drop Room at 6 p.m. EST, which is a Counter-Strike based show where we're going to be diving in depth. Also going to be starting a bit of a weekly update video that'll happen on the Nerd Street YouTube. You can give them all a follow on Twitter at Nerd Street Gamers. That's N3RDST Gamers. I hope you know how to spell gamers. You can also give me a follow if you've enjoyed this. I'm Darf Mike. You can find me at Darf Mike on Twitter. And if you've enjoyed hearing about Vireo Pro and all that they have to bring to the esports scene and the Counter-Strike scene specifically, you can give my lovely guest a follow at vitalTBE. That's VITALTBE. You can also give their organization a follow. Your Twitter's at Vireo Pro, right?
Yep.
At Vireo Pro. Give them a follow. Check out the team. It's certainly a team that's worth watching at this point in the Mountain Dew League season. We're talking playoffs, baby. So give them a follow. Check out their players. Check out the teams as they're going in. If you're interested in Rivals Aether, seems like an interesting game to get involved in. So check that out as well. And that's going to be it from us this week. Tune in again next week at 8 p.m. on Thursday when I'll be here with somebody else.